From the seaside resort of Zandvoort in Holland, welcome to the Dutch Grand Prix, round 12 of the 1983 World Championship. And there you see the championship points, with the Frenchman Alain Prost with a 14-point lead over the Brazilian Nelson Piquet. And that is why Nelson Piquet is so very, very anxious to improve his score today. And that incentive has helped him to put his car on pole position for this race. That's the first pole position he's had since the Austrian Grand Prix last year. Zandvoort's a circuit that Piquet has won on before, and he's very determined to do well today. Alongside him, Patrick Tambay with the turbocharged Ferrari. Tambay currently fourth in the championship, the personable Frenchman. And on row two, the man who was fastest of all in Friday's practice, the Italian Elio De Angelis, using turbocharged Renault power in his Lotus. Alongside him, also with turbocharged Renault power, of course, the championship leader, Alain Prost with the Renault. And he is very anxious for more points today to put him even further in front in the championship. Let's look down the grid. Piquet in the Brabham and Tambay in the Ferrari on the front row. Row 2, De Angelis in the Lotus and Prost in the Renault. So both Renault engines on the second row. Moving back to row 3, Mansell's Lotus and Patrase's Brabham. Row 4, Warwick's Tolman and De Cesaris with the Alfa. Then to row 5, Winkelhock with the ATS, Arnoux with the Ferrari, very well done after practice problems, Cheever in the second Renault, and Mauro Baldi in the turbocharged Alfa. Then we move to row 7. It's Bruno Giacomelli with the Tolman next, and Mark Sura with the Arrows, John Watson, the second fastest of the non-turbos, and Stefan Johansson with the turbocharged Honda Spirit. Then row 9 is Jacques Lafitte with the Saudia Williams. Still not with its turbocharged engine. They're going to have the Honda engine before very long. And Alboreto with the new Tyrrell. Row 10, Niki Lauda. This is an important car because it's the first race for the new turbo McLaren with its tag Porsche engine. And Roberto Guerrero with the only Theodore to qualify. Row 11, Boutsen's Arrows and Charrier's Ligier. Row 12, the world champion Keke Rosberg right down on the penultimate row of the grid with Raoul Boesel in the Ligier. And on the very back row, Corrado Fabi with the Azella and Danny Sullivan with the older type Tyrrell. So 26 cars on the grid and an enormous amount of interest in that Niki Lauda car. There it is with the new tag turbo engine developed by Porsche. This car rolled a wheel for the first time on Friday. It's very, very new, but now the lights are red, the lights are green, the field move away. A wonderful start from Cheever, who's almost in the pit lane. But it's poleman Nelson Piquet who's away to a clear lead, and Cheever is second. The incredible Cheever's come up from 12th, 11th position on the grid up into second. His own teammate is third, though, so the Renaults are second and third. But it's Brabham first, Renault, Brabham, and then De Cesaris is next up as the field goes storming through the back section behind the pits, up the hill from the Hugenholzbocht, and the Renault's second and third. Cheever is indeed second. René Arnoux is storming through, and meanwhile Patrick Tambay, you saw a glimpse of Ferrari number 27 there. Patrick Tambay from the front row was left almost for dead and staggered away almost at the tail of the pit of the field. Some sort of starting problem, transmission or clutch problem, we can only guess. But that has allowed Nelson Piquet to storm away on this first of 72 laps in the Dutch Grand Prix. Nelson Piquet, the leader in the Brabham. Second is Cheever, third is Prost, fourth is Patrese in the second Brabham, so it's Brabham, Renault, Brabham, and then De Cesaris is next up with the Alfa, and those five seem to be pulling away from the rest of the field. René Arnoux well down because of his bad grid position, and Patrick Tambay right near the tail of the field. It doesn't look good for Ferrari. The start of lap 2. The Brabham, the two Renaults, the Brabham and the Alfa storm down into the Tarzan hairpin, and Cheever is still there second ahead of his, I think, rather surprised teammate Alain Prost. It's Prost who's really hungry for championship points, and I can't believe that Prost is going to let his young American teammate stay in front of him for long. There's De Cesaris in 5th place. Andrea De Cesaris going strongly. De Cesaris, who had an argument during practice with Riccardo Patrese, who interestingly is the man in front of him. Each claimed that the other had balked them in practice. No love lost between these two Italians on this weekend anyway. But on the second of 72 laps, it's still Nelson Piquet storming away in front from Eddie Cheever. Alain Prost, Riccardo Patrese and Andrea De Cesaris. Now, are these two Ferraris going to be able to come through from their poor starts? There's De Cesaris making up the fifth, and there is Nelson Piquet on his way, already with a very useful lead. Bit of black oil smoke from the turbocharged BMW engine following the car round as he goes on towards the start-finish straight once again. And are those two Renaults closing up at all? De Cesaris still in touch at the back of that five-car group and back in sixth place. That looks like René Arnoux already coming through into sixth place, so Arnoux is absolutely storming in the Renault. Chiva still in second place, having started, remember, from 11th place on the grid. One of the great starts we've seen this season, but already his teammate is attacking. Number 15, the second of those Renaults, is the World Championship leader Alain Prost, and he doesn't like having his number 2 man ahead of him. Through the twisting, hilly, curving section, the back of this wonderfully scenic circuit, which literally runs through the sand dunes by the seashore here at Zandvoort. De Cesaris in 5th place, and still in 6th, it is the red Ferrari. You'll see a glimpse of it perhaps at the back of this section. René Arnoux closing up. There's Chiva, the 2nd place man, and Prost in 3rd place. And all the time, out in front, it's that Brabham of Nelson Piquet. Piquet, who's currently 2nd in the World Championship, having scored only 1 win this year, which was right at the beginning of the season. That was his home Grand Prix in Brazil. And most of the rest of his points he scored from 2nds and 3rds and 4ths. But it's 9 points that he wants today. Starting his 4th lap now. And Patrese is closing on Prost. There you see the Ferrari, number 28. That is René Arnoux, storming through to make up for his lowly grid position, which was a legacy of all sorts of practice problems. But Arnoux through Tarzan and on through the Gerlach Bocht, down to the Hugenholz, that very sharp downhill hairpin. There it is, named after the man who designed this circuit, John Hugenholz. And Arnoux accelerating away up. That is Jean-Pierre Jarier in the Ligier, the man who caused all the trouble when he was being lapped in Austria a couple of weeks ago. Jarier getting out of the car, and he looks out of the race. He's parked the car out on the circuit. A glimpse there of Derek Warwick, who's going well. Derek Warwick is currently in 7th place, with Elio De Angelis 8th. But that's Arnoux, that characteristic hunched driving position. He sits very far forward in the cockpit with his head tucked down. Very determined man indeed. He's pulling away from Derek Warwick, who's the next up, and he's trying to close on De Cesaris. There you see him, just in the shot there, and he is closing on De Cesaris, but look at Prost attacking Chiva. Prost goes through. The traditional Zandvoort overtaking place, under braking for the Tarzan hairpin. Alain Prost passes his teammate, Eddie Chiva, and goes into 2nd place. So now the first 2 men in the World Championship points table are 1st and 2nd in this race. Piquet currently 2nd in the championship leads. Oh, and Chiva was off there. Chiva definitely on the grass, a mistake by Chiva. This is lap 5, and that has allowed Prost to shake his teammate Eddie Chiva comfortably off, and that will also have allowed Riccardo Patrese to get close. There they are, Patrese closing. Oh, and smoke from the Alpha. I think De Cesaris is in trouble. A big puff of smoke there from Andrea De Cesaris. It could be oil slopping out of an overfull tank, but I think that looks like an engine problem for De Cesaris. Yes, he's falling back. Yes, there's a lot of smoke there. And René Arnoux is behind him. Arnoux coming up, pouncing to take 5th place. Slowing the Alpha. The Alpha is slowing, lots of smoke, and René Arnoux is going to be 5th any minute. René Arnoux is indeed 5th. De Cesaris is 6th, but from the look of that smoke from both exhaust banks of the Turbo Alpha, I think he's going to be making for the pits. And that's going to promote Derek Warwick. And the man who wants to move up is Riccardo Patrese. Patrese attacking Chiva now. This is lap 6. And there indeed is De Cesaris coming into the pits. No more smoke, which could well mean that all the oil has gone from the Turbo Alpha engine. and that's going to promote Derek Warwick up into 6th place. René Arnoux now 5th, and there you see the order. Piquet the leader, Prost 3.5 seconds behind, Cheever in the second Renault, under pressure as you see now from Patrese. Arnoux is 5th, Warwick is 6th in the Tolman, and he's got the 2 Lotuses behind it, because Elio De Angelis is now 7th, 8th is now Nigel Mansell, both of them of course in the Renault-powered Lotuses, and also going well in 9th place, Stefan Johansson in the Honda-powered Spirit. So all the turbos storming away, but one of them out already, that's De Cesaris, and still this Brabham-Renault battle going on, and René Arnoux closing all the time in the Ferrari and looking good to take on the leaders. Riccardo Patrese really closing all the time on the second Renault, number 16, that's Eddie Cheever. And look for the Ferrari coming up behind them. There it is, the red Ferrari of Arnoux, because as Cheever has to drive defensively to hold off Patrese, that means that Arnoux, with a clear road in front, is going to be able to close. This is lap 7 now, so the race won 10th over already. Over the brow goes Cheever, Patrese, and just behind them it's Arnoux, as over the start-finish line to start his 8th lap goes the leader, Piquet, and look at how Prost is closing in 2nd place. Here's the battle for 3rd, and Patrese pulls out. Patrese goes through. Cheever chops back to try and take the place back on the inside under braking for the Tarzan corner, but he can't do it. Riccardo Patrese is through, and Arnoux closes yet again. So it's Brabham, Renault and Ferrari, the first 5, and Derek Warwick is 6th in the Tolman. Derek Warwick, who's never yet scored championship points for himself or from Tolman, but we see the Patrese manoeuvre again. Watch Cheever tuck into the slipstream and try to get the pace back under braking down the inside, but he's just not quite close enough to do it, and the confident Patrese goes on his way. So Patrese now 3rd, Cheever now 4th, and now Cheever's got his next problem, which is the hard-charging René Arnoux right behind. Patrese then, pulling away from Cheever. Riccardo Patrese, who's had a most unhappy season this year. The race that he should have won, the Imola race, he threw it all away with an accident under pressure from Tombe. There's Prost completing his 9th lap, starting his 10th. Look how Patrese in 3rd place has pulled away from Cheever 4th and Arnoux 5th. Arnoux takes the wide line under braking, bends his crash helmet, bends his head, tucks in, accelerates away from the Tarzan corner, and a glimpse there of Derek Warwick, who's not very far behind in 6th place. And now we see the Spirit under pressure. This is the battle behind the Lotuses, because John Watson is storming up. John Watson goes through the inside of Stefan Johansson in the Spirit, and remember, John Watson has not got turbocharged power. His car much less powerful. There, the McLaren in the picture now is Niki Lauda closing on Michele Alboreto. Niki Lauda, who has the turbo-powered Porsche engine, tag Porsche engine in his McLaren, but John Watson, who is comfortably ahead of them, is going very, very strongly indeed with just Cosworth power, giving away perhaps 150 to 200 horsepower to the turbos. There's only one turbo McLaren here. It's being given to Lauda. Perhaps John Watson isn't very happy about that. I think what John Watson is particularly not happy about is that Niki Lauda's place is secure in the McLaren team next year, but Watson's isn't. So Alboreto under pressure from Niki Lauda, but meanwhile Watson past the Spirit and moving up the field. Michele Alboreto in the green Tyrrell. Niki Lauda in the red and white tag turbo McLaren. And ahead of them, the yellow ATS of Manfred Winkelhock. There's Watson, there's the Spirit, there is Mauro Baldi's Alpha, and the yellow car crossing the line now is the ATS, but Lauda goes ahead of Alboreto at last. Niki Lauda takes a place and leaves Alboreto very little room on the outside to make sure that he keeps his place. A very determined move there, and behind Alboreto now is the fast recovering Patrick Tambay in the Ferrari, who had that disastrous start. We believe it was due to a clutch problem on the Ferrari. The car just staggered away from the line. It was on the front row of the grid, you'll remember, but it made a very poor getaway, and now Patrick Tambay has to carve up through the traffic. The ATS, the McLaren Turbo, Alboretto's Tyrrell, and there is Tambay's Ferrari. So Tambay's Ferrari closing on Alboretto's Tyrrell, the ATS cockpit. It looks like a strip of the sponge rubber with which the cockpit has been padded, because so new is this car. It only turned a wheel for the first time the day before yesterday when Niki Lauda took it out for practice. They've had to pad the seat. Meanwhile, the position at the end of 10 laps shows that Prost is now 4.8 seconds down on Piquet, so Piquet keeping that healthy gap. Patrese is still third. Chiva still fourth. Arnoux closing on Chiva in fifth place. Oh, and Arnoux goes through! I said he was closing, but he's by. Arnoux makes up another place, and the Ferrari is fourth. So Chiva, after that magnificent start, which took him from 11th place on the grid up to second, is now demoted to fifth at the start of lap 16. And Chiva's fighting back, but that Ferrari is by. We see it again, the classic manoeuvre. Chiva trying to keep the door shut, but Arnoux sneaks up the inside under braking and squeezes through with about 6 inches to spare between his left back wheel and Chiva's right front. And he's pulling away already, as you see, and Riccardo Patrese is his next goal ahead of him. And we shall see from the stopwatches, if we don't see it on the road, just how long it takes René Arnoux to close the gap between himself in fourth place now and Riccardo Patrese in third. Still the Brabham of Nelson Piquet leads. Still the Renault of Alain Prost in second place. Patrese third, Arnoux fourth, there you see them, and Chiva fifth. Those three crossing the start-finish line to start now lap 17. The distinctive flames from the back of the turbo Brabham BMW as Patrese comes off the power, unburnt fuel going through the hot exhaust pipe, puffs of flame there again into the Hugenholtz, the left hand uphill hairpin out of the Hugenholtz. This is Patrese in third place, and he doesn't need his pit signals to tell him that the very determined René Arnoux in the very rapid turbo Ferrari is getting all the time closer and closer. Riccardo Patrese, who has scored just 4 championship points so far this year, he finally came home third in the German Grand Prix at Hockenheim at the beginning of this month, and that broke his duck. Up to then, he hadn't scored any championship points at all this year. 4-cylinder turbocharged BMW engine of 1.5 litres against a 6-cylinder turbocharged Ferrari engine of 1.5 litres. The regulations, of course, allow 1.5 litres turbocharged or 3 litres unturbocharged, but it's the turbocharged engines which are very comfortably the quickest. And that reminds me to mention the amazing progress of John Watson. You don't see him on the screen at the moment, but on our lap charts, John Watson is now up into 8th place. Nigel Mansell is 7th. Derek Warwick is still 6th. Chiva, as we know, is 5th. And here's René Arnoux in 4th place and charging on up the field. Feeding the power on. It's a cold and rather blustery day here at Zandvoort, and the blustery winds mean that there's a typical Zandvoort hazard, because the sand tends to blow from the side of the circuit onto the track, which makes the circuit not only very slippery, but also extremely abrasive and very wearing on tyres. As usual, we're going to have, and that's Winkelhock under pressure from Tambay. Tambay working his way up through the field, and he's up to the BMW turbo-powered ATS of Manfred Winkelhock. Winkelhock, incidentally, had problems before the start of the race and came out of the pits very late. and only just made his position on the starting grid. 6.6 seconds the gap between Piquet and Prost, so he's still just pulling away fractionally. But less than 2 seconds between Patrese and Arnoux. That was at the end of 16 laps. We're now on lap 18. Oh, and a twitch there from Winkelhock, who's having to work very hard to fend off Patrick Tambay, who's had to come all the way through from the very back of the field. We're just checking the lap chart, which shows us that he's now in 6, 3, 6, 9, 10, 11th place. The ATS, the yellow car, is 10th, Patrick Tambay is 11th. But as we were about to say, all of these cars have got, all the turbocharged cars anyway, have got routine pit stops ahead of them. Ferraris will be stopping, the Renaults will be stopping, and we see in the background another place for new and still untried TAG turbo-powered McLaren. Nicky was saying that he's pleased with the way the car's going. They've got a lot of work to do to it yet, and his dearest wish in this race is simply to finish. Obviously the McLaren team very much with their sights set on next year with the very powerful TAG turbo Porsche. But a very useful testing race this for Niki Lauda. But remember that his teammate with perhaps 150 horsepower less, there you see the strips of sponge rubber out of the cockpit, his teammate with 150 horsepower less is well ahead of him. That's John Watson. Arnoux still pursuing Riccardo Patrese, and Patrese is still maintaining that third place. And I think the traditional place for overtaking down into the Tarzan hairpin must be where Arnoux is going to line up to have a go at Patrese. But Patrese, who's had such a miserable season, and himself perhaps now thinking of his position in the Brabham team, is he going to be kept? Is he going to have to be hunting for a drive at the end of the year? Patrese very determined to keep René Arnoux at bay. René Arnoux, who's been winning races this season, Riccardo Patrese, who hasn't, who's only got that flukish win in the Monte Carlo Grand Prix last year to put as a notch on his steering wheel. Behind you see, you just had a glimpse there of Shiva lapping Roberto Guerrero, one of the back markers in the Theodore. And back markers could well be a problem in this race because the twists and turns of Zandvoort mean that it's difficult to find a place to pass unless it's being made reasonably easy for you by the man in front. We saw in the Austrian Grand Prix a couple of weeks ago, if you were with us, the consequence of a back marker not wanting to be overtaken when Charrier held up Patrick Tambay, and Tambay lost the lead and in fact dropped to third place. And in the battles that are taking place, that's Corrado Fabi's Azella ahead now of Patrese and Arnoux has got to find a way past the Azella and at the same time ensure that Arnoux doesn't box clever and find a way past both of them. Arnoux with his head tucked forward as ever. And Corrado Fabi still ahead of them in the Azella. The Azella, which uses the V12 non-turbocharged Alpha engine, one of the more powerful non-turbos, but both of them are past, and Arnoux's trying on the inside. There's nowhere to go, he goes the other side. Both of them past the Azella, and Arnoux now chops across, looks at the inside into Tarzan under braking. But as they start their 20th lap, Patrese has managed by the narrowest of margins to hang on to that third place. Both of these men really fighting. We see it again. Arnoux chops across to the left of the road, but Patrese has the inside line, so Arnoux dives across once more and tries to go up the inside. He's not quite close enough. And the consequences of leaving your braking too late for Tarzan mean a trip into the sand barriers. That's where René Arnoux ended up last year, incidentally, after a suspension breakage on his Renault. Now 6.4 seconds. Oh, and Arnoux nearly going ahead then, but you saw from the caption 6.4 seconds. the gap at the end of 20 laps between leader Nelson Piquet in the Brabham and second man Alain Prost in the Renault, and all the excitement is on this battle for third place, and Arnoux trying absolutely everywhere. Patrese cannot rest. The slightest mistake, the slightest bumped curve is going to put that Ferrari ahead, and they come up to the long drag down to Tarsen once more to start their 21st lap. What is Arnoux going to do? Patrese keeps to the right to try and keep the door shut, moves across. Arnoux now going through. Is he going to get through? Arnoux goes through. Arnoux is through, a perfectly executed manoeuvre. Patrese was on the right of the road trying to keep the door shut, but he had to move across to the left to take his braking line, and that was the gap that Arnoux needed. Hard on the brakes, absolutely on the edge of adhesion, Arnoux goes through. So, as we see Niki Lauda now coming into the pits, perhaps he now wants to do something about those flapping bits of rubber. Arnoux, Niki Lauda in the pits with the turbo McLaren. All the suited McLaren mechanics, they are going into their pit stop routine, but I think it's something more serious than that, because this is too early for a routine pit stop. Yes, Ron Dennis at the front holds his hand out. On the right of the cockpit, John Barnard bends over and talks to Niki Lauda. John Barnard, the car's designer. The mechanics descend on the car once more, and that's Nigel Mansell off. Nigel Mansell in the sand at Tarsen. Now Mansell was pursuing Derek Warwick. A lot of rivalry between these two top British drivers. And Derek Warwick, who is 6th, Nigel Mansell was 7th, and Mansell was closing on him. This is lap 26. Still this battle between the Patrese Brabham and the Chiva Renault goes on. That's now, of course, the battle for 4th place, and we're going to see the Mansell incident. He has clearly out-braked Warwick. In fact, he's left his braking very, very late. He spins backwards into the sand. Derek Warwick goes harmlessly by, retains his 6th place, and Mansell, I can see his car being towed out of the way. Yes, they're being towed out of the way to a position of safety by the marshals at Tarsen. So Mansell's race is run, and Niki Lauda's race is run. That's Niki Lauda in the red crash helmet, walking away from the car. So 31 laps completed. Piquet, Prost, Arnoux, Patrese, Chiva, and look at John Watson. He's up into 6th place with the non-turbocharged McLaren, and 5.1 seconds is the gap between the leader Piquet and the second man Prost, with 13 seconds between the leader and the hard-charging René Arnoux. And as we were saying earlier, remember that these leading turbocharged cars are all going to make pit stops. So indeed is Watson, and Chiva is past Patrese. Chiva goes ahead of Patrese there, moves back in front. So obviously Patrese not as quick as he was earlier on, and Chiva goes back into 4th place. Quite easily too, down into Tarsen. Patrese follows, the flames from the Brabham exhaust once again. This now is lap 33, so we are approaching the halfway point, and these pit stops are going to come soon. Now 5 seconds between the two leaders, Nelson Piquet's Brabham and Prost. There is Piquet and Prost in the Renault, so that 5 seconds difference between their pit stops could change the whole face of the race. And as we come up now, the start of lap 35, Bruno Giacomelli just passing Guerrero's Theodore there, but now we see Prost closing on Piquet, and once more we have this back numbers situation, because Piquet's Brabham is in among those back numbers. He's just on those back markers. He's alongside Guerrero and in front of Alain Prost. The back markers have definitely delayed, inadvertently I'm sure, but they have definitely delayed the leader, and that has allowed this gap between Piquet and Prost to close. Now, Prost has got them to pass as well, of course, but it's always said that it's hardest for the leader, because he's the first man that comes up to lap the slower cars. Once he's gone through, he's stuck behind Bruno Giacomelli at the moment. Once the lead has gone through, the slower cars are more conscious of what's coming up in those little tiny mirrors on each side of the cockpit. And still Giacomelli is holding up the leader, Piquet, and that means that Prost is going to be able to close considerably. Prost is past Guerrero's Theodore, and he can see what's happening in front of him. And still Piquet is stuck behind the Toleman. Piquet goes past at last. Piquet crosses the start-finish line to start his 36th lap, chops across in front of Bruno Giacomelli. So Piquet has lapped Giacomelli out of Tarzan, and Prost is definitely closer. You don't need a stopwatch to show that this race is now developing into a battle for the lead, and what a wonderful race it's turning out to be. Now, is Giacomelli going to allow Alain Prost an easier passage past? He does. He makes it much easier for Prost. He pulls way to the left of the road, offline, coming out of Hugenholtz, and that allows Prost to waste much less time than Nelson Piquet had to, and Prost's blood is now up. Both of them have pit stops to make, and that could change the face of the race. But Alain Prost wants to get by. That is one of the Williamses. That was, I think, Jacques Laffitte's Williams keeping well out of the way. It was the green-helmeted Frenchman Jacques Lafitte keeps well out of the way, like the professional driver he is, of the leading battle. But Alain Prost now only a few car lengths behind Nelson Piquet. And it's now that Piquet is really going to have to start driving defensively. Instead of taking the optimum line on the corners, he's got to take the defensive line, and that's often quite difficult. They've got Manfred Winkelhock's ATS ahead of them to lap, and that's a turbocharged car. That's fast in a straight line. Prost go through. He so nearly went through. Piquet had to come off the power because the ATS was ahead of them, and now Prost is really challenging for the lead. Over the brow of the hill, away over the Hunserug, and up to Schivlak, the right-hander. Very slippery there because the sand's been blowing across the circuit, and Prost is closing. Prost is poised to pounce, and still they haven't passed the ATS. Prost nearly goes through. Piquet slams the door in his face, and an indication of how defensively Piquet is having to drive now is that the ATS ahead of them, which they're coming up to lap, has in fact moved ahead. The ATS lining up to itself to try to lap the Azella of Corrado Fabi, which is at least a couple of laps down. But still, Piquet has the lead by the narrowest of margins, over the brow, coming now towards the start-finish straight. And surely Alain Prost is going to have a think, at least, about the traditional out-braking manoeuvre as they come down the pit straight. The ATS passes the Azella. Is Piquet going to try and go between the two of them? No, Piquet follows the ATS by. Oh, and the car bottomed there. A shower of sparks from the Brabham. It looked as though the Brabham bottomed there, and now the ATS is between the leaders. Piquet has done it right. He's managed to box Prost so that, in fact, the ATS moves out of the way at the Hugenholtz box. So Prost is ahead now, and once more, Piquet has his mirrors full, not of yellow ATS, but of yellow Renault. And this, remember, is the fight between the first two in the World Championship. Piquet now on his 37th lap through Schivlak, storming through the Marlborough box, and we've got Cheever in the pits for a routine pit stop. On his 39th lap, Cheever is in the pits for his routine stop, which means that the other Renault stock can't be far behind. Keeping the engine running, of course. The fuel goes in, the fuel is done. The tyres are done. It's a quick one. 12.6 seconds to change 4 tyres and to put in 30 gallons of fuel. And after 12.6 stationary seconds, Eddie Cheever is back in the race. A very slick, professional pit stop from the Renault crew. But the battle for the lead is still on, and down the start-finish straight with the Spirit Honda in front of them to be lapped. Prost is tucked into the slipstream. He doesn't have a go this time through Tarzan. Is Stefan Johansson going to keep out of the way? René Arnoux now in the pits. René Arnoux, who's been a real man to watch in this race in his charge up the field. And of course that's taken him to third place. He's now in the pits for his routine stop, and that's a quick one. 10.18 seconds, a twitch there as he powers down the pit lane. René Arnoux, a perfect pit stop, and still this battle for the lead. They've just passed Eddie Cheever, interestingly, who has kept well out of the way, as he well should, because it's now surely that Prost's going to make an effort on the inside. No, Piquet closes the door once more. Two of Grand Prix racing's top drivers fighting absolutely every inch of the way, both of them absolutely on the limit, and Piquet knows that Prost is going to take the smallest opportunity to get by. Coming now back towards the start-finish section as they come out of the back section of the circuit through the long Boss Sweet right-hander onto the start-finish section. Now look, Piquet's keeping to the right of the road. He doesn't want Prost to get a run down to him. Prost weaves, Piquet weaves to keep the door shut. Prost looks at the inside, Prost comes through, but no, he doesn't. And did you see Piquet glance in his mirrors there to see which side the Frenchman was going to go for? Very much, as I said, defensive driving. Oh, and again under braking for the Hugenholtz left-hander. The nose of the Renault was nudging alongside, and Cheever's back in the pits. Cheever is back in the pits, having just had his stop. Cheever back in the pits. Oh, and they waved him out again. Cheever obviously has a problem following his pit stop, but they didn't want him to come in because they have got Prost, the man they hope will win this race, about to come in. So team manager Gerard Leroux simply waved Cheever out. We don't know what his problem was, but Cheever has been waved out of the pits, and there is Patrese now. So the first of the Brabham routine stops. We haven't got the watch on it, but it looks quick. Back wheels down, off the jacks. Gordon Murray jumps out of the way. 12.18 seconds for Riccardo Patrese. So one of the Brabhams has stopped, one of the Renaults has stopped, one of the Ferraris making the most untypical mistake there. And Prost must be slowing. I think Prost has got a problem because Stefan Johansson has unlapped himself. Prost is our new leader, but I wonder if Prost's got a problem. We're going to see it yet again. In the slipstream, out of the slipstream, looking at the inside, and Alain Prost. What a shame. Prost, a little mistake, which took him and the race leader out, and Patrick Tambay now suddenly scenting not only championship points, but a lot of championship points, because his pit signals will have told him that he's in third place. And Manfred Finkelhock, we understand, in the ATS has been black flagged. One of the race officials pulling him into the side, talking to Finkelhock, the German, with the turbo BMW powered ATS. We understand he's been black flagged for some sort of infringement of the regulations to do with the start of the race. Remember that, and he's angry. He's banged the steering wheel. He's an angry man, Finkelhock. He didn't come under conventional starters' orders. I think that probably must be the problem, because his car gave trouble before the warm-up, and he came late onto the starting grid. That's Patrick Tambay, wearing, of course, the number 27. Used to be Gilles Villeneuve's number. This is lap 50 now. And Patrick Tambay, helped by others' misfortunes, somewhat, no doubt to his surprise, finds himself in third place and closing there on Riccardo Patrese, who is second. The sole surviving Brabham is second, that's Riccardo Patrese. And there is Finkelhock being told, or in fact reading the official piece of paper. He doesn't look a happy man, reading the official piece of paper which brings him news of his disqualification. As we see the world champion Keke Rosberg, it's going to be a routine stop, but Rosberg waving his hands to the mechanics saying, don't bother to hurry, chaps, my race is run. Rosberg, who had been way down the field, driving hard as he always does, but clearly on this day the Williams not worthy of the world champion, not only lacking turbo power but also lacking handling, as we see Mauro Baldi lapping there. Raoul Boesel, that's Stefan Johansson going through, and Bruno Giacomelli. Oh, and René Arnoux waves at Bruno Giacomelli saying, come on, chum, get out of the way. I'm leading the race and I'm in a hurry. Bruno Giacomelli once more, inadvertently perhaps, getting in the way, but then a little wave from Arnoux which says, okay, you have let me by, thank you very much. In fact, Arnoux now with an enormous lead on lap 56, and Riccardo Patrese in second place under very considerable threat from, oh, I said considerable threat, and there you see them. Patrese under very considerable threat indeed from Patrick Tambay, because now, once more, Patrese has to fight a defensive battle because his second place is under threat from Patrick Tambay. Patrick Tambay, who started this race just about dead last from the front row of the grid after a bad start due, we believe, to clutch problems, has come all the way up through the field, helped of course by the misfortunes of the likes of Nelson Piquet, Alain Prost and Eddie Cheever, but he is now battling for second place with the sole surviving Brabham of Riccardo Patrese. Patrese, who I think must be suffering from a shortage of power, perhaps because Eddie Cheever was able to get his place back from him earlier before we saw Cheever himself retire. This is now lap 57 and still the leader, René Arnoux, Ferrari. There you see it, Patrese second, Tambay third, John Watson that magnificent fourth, and Derek Warwick must have his heart in his mouth because he's in fifth place. So often he's retired from a race with the Tolman. He's never scored championship points. Today could be the day. Mauro Baldi is W engine in Patrese's Brabham. I must say that it's not very easy for Tambay. So obviously whatever Patrese's problems were that saw Cheever quite easily get his place back earlier in the race. Oh, that's Giacomelli off. I thought for a moment it might be the Tolman of Warwick, but it's Giacomelli who's had a little spin there in the other Tolman, which is well down the field. But whatever Patrese's problems are, we think he's going pretty strongly at the moment. Going very strongly indeed. René Arnoux, the leader. Back markers ahead of him to be lapped. Stefan Johansson and Raoul Boesel. Johansson in the Spirit, Boesel in the sole surviving Ligier, because you'll remember that Jean-Pierre Jarier was a very early retirement as they pass the abandoned Renault of Cheever. And once more this battle for second place. And there you see Patrese has actually pulled out a useful little bit of road on Tambay. So Tambay threatening to take that second place, but Patrese certainly holding his own. Ferrari, Brabham Ferrari, then non-turbocharged McLaren fourth, and we see Giacomelli's spin once more. Flames from the back of the turbocharged engine down the exhaust pipe as ever, and once more second and third place men are very close again through the Jugendholzbocht, up the hill to the Hunzerug, over that brow, the left-hander, the very fast curving right-hander that leads into Schivlak, and along the back section of the course, and Tambay really is close now. The car's bouncing over the bumps, and Tambay now looking very threatening. Tambay having a little look at the inside for that panorama bocht, one of the tightest corners on the circuit, but it didn't do him any good, and that effort having failed, Tambay has dropped back just a little bit. Coming up now to Bossuit, which is the long right-hander that leads them on to the start-finish straight. Over the brow, out of Bossuit, and on down the start-finish straight once more. And again, Tambay is not close enough. He seems to make up most of his ground actually on the twisting sections, and it's on this long straight that the Brabham pulls away from the Ferrari. So the Ferrari gains somewhere and loses somewhere, and still these two battle it out. What a lot of wonderful battles we've had in this Dutch Grand Prix. This is lap 66, so 6 laps left to go. René Arnoux, the comfortable leader, but the race very much alive with this battle for second between Riccardo Patrese and Patrick Tambay. Tambay currently 4th in the World Championship, although a good finish here is going to do him a lot of good, because remember, Prost, the championship leader, and Piquet, the championship number 2 at the moment, have both retired. They retired so dramatically in that accident at Tarsen. And still Patrese is 2nd. And still Tambay not quite close enough to do anything about it in 3rd place. John Watson a distant 4th. Still going in 5th place, Derek Warwick in the Tolman. Mario Baldi in the lone surviving Alpha, still 6th. De Cesaris, of course, an early retirement. And these 2 Ferraris, who both started the race with such a handicap. Oh, and is Tambay going to have a go now? Tambay is closer this time. He's not quite close enough. Not quite. Puff of flame from the Brabham's exhaust as he comes briefly off the power for the Hunzerug. Through Schivlak once more. This time about a car's length in it. Once again, Tambay closes for the Marlborough Bocht. This tight chicane on the back straight. Now through Tunnel Oost, down to Panorama Bocht. Down to Bossuit. Big complex back wing with its 2 side pieces on the Ferrari. There you see the gap at the end of 65 laps, although this is now lap 67. The gap half a second between these 2, and 25 seconds clear is René Arnoux. 20 seconds down on the Tambay Patrese battle. 20 seconds down on that is John Watson. Once again, Tambay is not this to Patrese in the San Marino Grand Prix earlier in the season, and Patrese was leading, Tambay was pushing him, and Patrese made an inexcusable mistake, crashed the car. Tambay went on to win, and Patrese, the Italian in front of the Italian crowd, had to walk home with his head hung in shame. Tambay, of course, very, very popular. Oh, and Tambay's going by! Tambay goes easily by, and that, I think, must be a mechanical problem for Patrese. Yes, Bruno Giacomelli closes up. Patrese must surely have a problem. We've now got Ferraris 1st and 2nd, and Patrese's car seems to be dying on him. It's going slower and slower. Here you see the action replay, and it's actually on the straight. Tambay just romps by, and there's nothing that Patrese can do about it. There is Thierry Boots and Arrows. That's Thierry Boots and Arrows with what looks like pretty terminal mechanical problems, lots of smoke and steam from the back of the car. But Tambay goes on his way. So Ferraris, despite things looking so black for the prancing horses of Maranello at the beginning of the race, Ferraris are 1st and 2nd. René Arnoux, a comfortable leader. Patrick Tambay now a comfortable and confident looking 2nd, and poor Riccardo Patrese finding his race absolutely going backwards. The car is still running. We could well see it coming into the pits any minute because it's going at about half the speed it should, as we see Tambay coming up to lap Raul Boesel, the Brazilian in the French Ligier team. The Brazilian in the French car, the Frenchman in the Italian car in 2nd place coming up to lap him. And Boesel keeps to the right of the road, tucks back in behind the Ferrari to try and get a little bit of a tow, perhaps as they go on towards the fast section, as we see René Arnoux now starting his 69th on Schivlak. And who would have thought at the end of lap 1 of this race that we would have seen Ferraris 1st and 2nd, and the old man himself, Enzo Ferrari, who doesn't come phone, knows exactly what's going on, still plays very much of a role behind the scenes, and Enzo Ferrari must, at this moment, be watching his television with considerable satisfaction as René Arnoux laps the unfortunate Riccardo Patrese to start his 70th lap. Now, is Patrese coming into the pits? The very slow car there could well be coming into the pits. We'll watch for it as you see René Arnoux coming for the 70th time of the 72 through Tarsen. And Arnoux clearly now with the race comfortably in his pocket. You can see driving a tidy race. No, Patrese doesn't come in. Patrese struggling past us and on his way. And that car, I would think, giving about as much power at the moment as a good Formula 3 car, if that. What a shame for Patrese, who, to be fair to him, drove a very, very good, clean defence of that second place. We were perhaps unfairly remembering his errors at is the non-turbocharged Cosworth-powered McLaren of a man who never says die, however low on the grid he may be starting. John Watson, he's come through from 15th starting position on the grid with a very definite power handicap against the turbocharged cars, and he's come through to third. John Watson, the most experienced man on the Grand Prix circuit, 155th win that the Cosworth Ford engine has scored since it won its first race here at the Dutch Grand Prix in 1967, all those years ago. Patrick Tambay then in second place with Ferrari number 27. René Arnoux still leading in Ferrari number 28. The astonishing John Watson in third place. And Derek Warwick. We haven't seen him on the picture recently, but Derek Warwick is still going in fourth place. René Arnoux now. This is René Arnoux' final lap. Arnoux through Tarzan for the last time. Arnoux, who won in Germany at the beginning of the month, who came second in the Austrian Grand Prix to Alain Prost just a couple of weeks ago, who's been really stacking up the points recently, and that's the Azella off. That is Corrado Fabi. Yet another visitor, right at the end of the race, yet another visitor to the ever-beckoning sand at Tarzan, as on his way for the last of his 72 laps goes René Arnoux. 35 years old, the Frenchman who now lives in Italy to be nearer the Ferrari team, passing once more Riccardo Patrese, who is staggering on to the finish, but Patrese now out of the points because Michele Alboreto, despite a lightning pit stop for more fuel because his car was misfiring, perhaps because it was low on fuel, he had a last-minute pit stop, and he is in sixth place and he's going to get a championship point, but 9 championship points is going to be the reward for René Arnoux, who comes up to win the 1983 Dutch Grand Prix. René Arnoux takes the checkered flag. Look at the delighted Ferrari mechanics. It's going to be a Ferrari 1-2 away from René Arnoux as he goes round the Tarzan hairpin that has played such a dramatic part in this race. The hairpin that saw Prost and Piquet take each other out of the race. Or Prost indeed take Piquet out of the race. There is Tambay getting the plaudits of the delighted Ferrari mechanics for second place. John Watson just 23 seconds behind Tambay is third. Derek Warwick scores championship points at last for Tellman. A red letter day for Tellman. 3 championship points for him. Mauro Baldi is fifth with the Alfa. And Michele Alboreto does take that sixth place, a lap behind, despite that late pit stop with the new Tyrrell. So Ferrari's 1 and 2, and look what that does to the World Championship. Prost, of course, doesn't score, stays on 51 points. René Arnoux now moves into second place, just 8 points behind. Piquet and Tambay are now equal in third place, and we've now got 3 World Championship rounds left to go. We've got Monza in 2 weeks, Brands Hatch in 4 weeks, then on to Kyle Army for the end of the season, and René Arnoux very, very pleased with his day's work. On the winner's rostrum, on his right is Patrick Tambay, also no doubt pleased with a race that looks as though it was turning all wrong, and John Watson in the blue on the right, having a drink and so pleased that he has finished in the points in a non-turbocharged car. 4 richly deserved points for him, and Watson surely consolidating his position, let's hope, in the McLaren team. The French national anthem plays for a slightly surprised looking René Arnoux, who gives a kiss to the delighted crowd. Ferrari's first and second, McLaren third. The World Championship is thrown wide open again. 2 weeks hence, we'll be in Italy for Monza. Join us then.